morning, Dr. Phil. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Anita. I'm doing fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm perfectly fine. It's early
Uh,
morning here. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Awesome. Awesome. Getting an early start.
cool. I have a lot of questions to ask you today. But
Let's go.
let's welcome our audience here. Welcome to Inner Pause. This is a space where for leaders, professionals, and humans navigating complexity, where we slow down just enough to listen inwardly. Here at Mindful Leadership begins with self-leadership, right? As we talk about, with
Mhm.
awareness, compassion, and the courage to meet what's here. I'm Aini, and together I have my co-host here, Dr. Phil. We explore what it is truly means to lead with presence and not pressure. Welcome, welcome. As
Awesome.
we always do, I would like that we take a few seconds of just quiet pause here.
Of course.
Great. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Dr. Phil, in our last conversation, we explore why mindful leadership matters and why now in today's high pressure work environment. So today we're going to be moving into the architecture of it, how inner regulation becomes our leadership. And I would
Mhm.
love to focus on your four pillars and how they translate the inner pause that we talk about into
Mhm.
outward presence, how leaders are going to apply these four pillars, right? So
Yes.
before we move into the four pillars, I also want to acknowledge that's something really, really important. Uh, we both draw from this universal truth of mindfulness practice, the rain practice, right? And that inner pause is just for the audience knowledge. It's recognize, allowing, investigating, and nurturing. And sometimes I describe it as inner regulation for the practitioner that stabilizes our inner nervous systems, that creates the space before we react, right? So instead
Yes.
of reacting, we respond, right? So, what I really appreciate about your four pillars is how they express that inner work that translate to the universal rain practice of mindfulness into leadership upwardly and in how leaders actually show up and relate. Would you mind sharing something about the four pillars? Because I'm really curious what inspired you to articulate mindful leadership through these four pillars.
Yeah, that's a great question, Annie. I'm glad you asked it because the four pillars came to me after doing extensive research on mindful leadership. Um, what I saw out there was leaders, just like you said, being reactive, not taking time for that inner pause. And what became clear was there was a gap between philosophy and practice. And I was really curious about that gap and why it was still there after all these years of mindful studying mindfulness and mindful leadership. And so the idea behind my four pillars was that I wanted to inspire people and find a way to operationalize their behavior and help them create that inner pause that you talk about that's so important. Because there's a RAIN framework, there's a few other frameworks that I found, but a lot of it wasn't operationalized into a specific leadership role, right? So the gap that was created, I saw a need, and after a lot of research, I came up with the four pillars. And they're basically, create awareness, you know, have awareness, have presence, and how do you do that, right? Be authentically grounded in what you're doing, because if you're not authentically grounded, you're creating chaos, and you're creating these ups and downs in your leadership role that make it difficult for your team members, and then they start to struggle and you aren't as successful. And then I thought, well, what I see out there and what I've seen in my executive consulting roles is emotional regulation is a huge part of leadership. And I saw that leaders weren't taking time to regulate their emotions, and take that pause. So I knew that emotional regulation had to be one of them. And the last one is how they communicate, right? How do they take what's inside them and communicate and express that out with intention, and with the intention that I don't want to just be heard, I want to be felt. I want to have everybody in the room feel the presence of what I'm saying, and also take time to listen to what's around me as well, and what's happening, with other team members during a meeting. So it's the internal external communication that come together to create that inner pause. And so that's what drew me to create the four pillars is, and I believe what they've done is operationalize leadership actions and behavior in a way that leaders can become more mindful if they use them and practice them.
Wow. So it's there's four pillars, and if you don't mind me repeating, it's awareness, like you mentioned, or just gonna
Mhm,
repeat it for the benefit of the audience who are listening. The
mhm,
grounded authenticity you mentioned earlier, and then there's this emotional regulation, and then
mhm.
there's communication, right? So I think
Yes.
as far as leadership is concerned, this four pillars says it all, right?
They cover a lot.
Right?
Yes.
It
They,
covers everything like yeah. Wow. Okay. So your
that was,
first pillar is full awareness. So I'm gonna really dive in. I really want the audience
yeah, yeah,
listening to
yeah.
benefit from your expertise. So your
Mhm.
first pillar is full awareness in the moment.
Yes, yes.
In practical leadership terms, what does that actually look like, especially when things are like fast-paced, high stakes decisions has to be now. We're in a boardroom, leaders are being pressured and things like that. So what does that actually look like in the real life application?
That's great. It means to me active leadership, taking
Oh,
an
I
active
love that word.
role.
Love that word.
Active, yeah.
Active leadership. Whoa, we're going to talk more about that.
Yeah, no, it really means being aware in the moment enough to activate your leadership principles, intentions, and values.
Mm.
Um, and you do that based on intention rather than reactivity.
Mhm.
Because if you're for example, if you may be in a situation in a team meeting where maybe your sales projections are low, right? And you're thinking to yourself, we need to get these higher, and how do I express this to my team? You know, I'm aware of it, but maybe I might be reactive to just say, you guys, our sales are down. What do we do? Right? Rather than take a moment and say, our sales are down. Hey, team, let's create a plan to get them up.
Mm,
Right? And you took a moment to think about, I'm not going to be reactive. I'm going to be fully aware of this moment. And I'm going to communicate my intentions to my team in a way that uplifts and inspires and helps them want to build sales, right?
yeah. Oh, this is truly impactful. Um, like if I were to put myself as a leader before
Mhm,
mindfulness practice, right?
mhm,
How? Because we both understand that the mindfulness practice brings creates that awareness for us. But let's see how we can gear this leader who doesn't practice mindfulness or who
mhm,
have not yet started the practice. How do these
mhm.
leaders know when they have lost that awareness and what would help them to then come back?
Come back.
Hey, you know?
That's great question. Great
Yeah.
question. Yeah. So from what I believe and have studied, it it's really physiology.
Mm,
It's it's okay. Take a minute and say, I'm feeling anxiety, I'm feeling stress, I'm feeling the pressure of needing to do better, and that physiology is how is my inner core, right? But I can take a pause, that inner pause you talk about, and change that and say, wait, that doesn't have to be how I react.
yeah.
I
Wow.
can react. I don't have to react out of fear or frustration or ego or anxiety. I can react out of compassion, empathy, and helpfulness to my team,
Mm,
right? And that's going to make a bigger impact. And that's what my intention is going to change because I've taken time to think about that physiology of how I'm feeling and changing my mental course for something better.
yeah. Changing how you relate to what actually happened that ground
Yes,
us in
that's
that awareness. Wow.
that's the awareness in the moment changes how you react and how you
Mm-hmm.
ch changes the course of what you say next, right?
Yeah,
We talked a lot about how the inner self creates the outer expression,
right.
and
Yeah,
and that's what it is in this case. You create that awareness in the moment and say, wait, I'm going to take a pause. That's
yeah.
gonna, and that little pause changes everything,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
That is really interesting. When you speak about that, it came to my mind. It's like, hey, I did that before. It's like I I stopped for a moment and say, hey, this is not you, I need. Compose,
Yes,
compose.
yes,
Hey,
yeah,
that subtle shift, right? I remember it.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It really is that self-regulation you're
Yeah,
talking about, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That self-regulation that you realize this isn't who I want to be. Let's change that pattern and readjust it to something that's going to be better and more effective.
Oh,
And that's your example is great because that's exactly what you did. You took a pause,
yeah.
you realized this isn't how I want to, this isn't my intention, this isn't how I want to come across. And you shifted your direction just slightly enough to get a better outcome.
So I caught myself reacting. Yeah, I caught myself getting angry. I said, hey, this is not you. We come back, right?
Yes. And what I love about you saying that is that you're reflecting out your values,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, this isn't me. This isn't a value that I want to have. This isn't an intention. of who I want to reflect out to the world. So I'm going to change it.
Mhm.
And it really is it part of it is your value system and
Mhm.
how you want to be seen by the world, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And how you want to be seen by others. So
I'm
it's such
loving this.
I think it's so important that leaders want to be seen in a
Mm.
positive light by those they lead.
Yeah.
And what they don't always do it because they don't have the right skills. You know, they haven't trained themselves mentally to be able to handle that
Mhm.
stress, to be handle that anxiety that hits you,
Mhm.
and then take that pause before
Mhm.
acting.
And that brings me to the next question. Awareness, and then your second pillar is grounded authenticity. So when you talk
Mhm.
about grounded authenticity, to me, it feels like, oh, this is like a powerful word, powerful phrase, right? How is grounded authenticity different from simply being yourself at work?
Good question. Because you can say, somebody asks you a question, you say, well, I'm just being honest about my answer, right? And you may come across as harsh or, maybe belittling to somebody. And you say, well, I'm just being myself, I'm just being honest. But that isn't aligned with your intent and your values,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So you have to have that conscious, intentional alignment to
mm,
your values
mm,
to be able to stay grounded in authenticity.
mm,
And that's what makes the difference. It's your internal and your external come together, your values and intentions align, and your that those values anchor you.
mm.
The values are your anchor
Yeah.
that keep you grounded in being authentic.
I love this how you shifted this from being in full awareness to grounded authenticity. Because like
Mhm.
what we mentioned earlier, that that example when I remember about me, hey, catching myself being angry, but that's
Mhm.
not me, that's not my value, right?
Right,
Like you say,
right.
being yourself means uh, you can say things that you just say it out without meaning or without substance, right?
Mhm.
And it doesn't
Mhm.
align with your value, like belittling people, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
Mm, mm,
It that groundedness makes all the difference, right? Um,
mm,
it's not just the groundedness, it's authenticity, right? You want to be everybody appreciates somebody who's authentic and
mm,
being themselves.
mm,
And we know when people aren't being authentic when we work with them every day.
mm, mm,
And so when they're inauthentic, it causes us to question and our trust in
mm.
them.
It's true.
And that's why the authenticity part is so important in being grounded,
Mm,
is that that's what develops that trust factor with other people you work with.
yeah.
They they know how you're going to react every time, and every situation is going to be similar, and they trust that, and they trust you.
I used to have a boss, ex-boss, who is very reactive.
Uh-huh.
And now I can see what grounded authenticity means. The
Uh-huh.
days that he's like super nice to you. Hi, Aini, how are you doing today? And the next day is, you know, it's totally two different person. And you don't know
Yeah.
where and what how is it coming, where is it coming from today, right? Like
Yes.
you say,
Yes.
trust is not there. So
Right.
I developed this shield, like, you know, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna go, just watch
Yes.
and see,
Yes.
right? So there's no connection there. Like
Hmm.
you don't know when he's gonna start reacting because sometimes he walks in and he says, "Good morning, Annie. How are you today?" Ooh, that's not him.
Yeah, it's that you hit the button on the nose, right? That's the difference, right?
Yeah,
Is
yeah, I can clearly see the difference, what you're trying to say, grounded authenticity.
yeah, it's
Wow.
both are important, right? Those are
Yeah.
both add
Would you
value.
would you be able to share maybe one more example? How do we really see in that sense that how does leaders develop this? What would your advice or you know
My fine for one more time.
how does leader who wants to develop this grounded authenticity, where do they start with?
The first thing they have to start with is noticing what's going on inside them. Their internal dialogue. What is happening here? And second, they have to regulate
Mm.
what, what's going on in a way that will have a positive outcome. And third is, in doing that, it widens your perspective. From a neurological perspective, if you take that pause, if you take time to regulate your body's emotions, it widens your perspective and gives you more options.
Ooh.
And it's those options and that widened perspective that helps you become more authentically grounded in what you do.
Yeah, I love what you say. It kind of open up your perspective. Yeah, it's
Yes.
exactly how I see the change in myself as well.
Yeah.
Before, as a leader, I have this tunnel vision now that I can share, right? Before, when I was in the tunnel vision, I didn't know that I was in the tunnel vision. But
Yes.
with that practice, I was able to see myself in that tunnel vision and be able to open up the perspective like, hey, I got many different other options. It doesn't have to be this way,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Wow.
Exactly. Exactly. That's a very good example
Thank
because
you
that's,
so
you
much.
know,
Thank
I
you.
think, it's a very, very good example you just gave about, how just taking a moment pause will widen your perspective and
Mm,
see
mm,
other options and alternatives that you didn't see before, right?
yeah. And I really find this practice beautiful in a way that before my practice,
Hmm.
um, I'm inside, right? The rabbit hole. But
Yeah.
after my practice, I was able to see myself inside the rabbit hole. That's the beauty of the practice.
Ah, I love that. I love that. It's
Yeah.
wonderful.
And that
Wonderful.
leads me to the third question, to the third pillar that I would love for you to share,
Mhm.
emotional regulation, right? Your you place emotional regulation as a pillar and not a side skill. And I think this is really important because, like you say, leaders are very reactive, they're reacting without this grounded authenticity and
Yeah.
awareness, right? Why do you see regulation as foundational rather than operational for leaders?
I see it more as foundational because it's something that a leader can learn to strengthen, to get better at. Um, I recently read a book that talked about if you learn to handle your fears and in extreme ways, like let's say you go diving with sharks, right?
Mm-hmm.
You decide I'm going to go diving with sharks, or you're scuba diving and sharks swim by you, and you're like, oh, you know, um, it's like that builds and helps build your emotional regulation, right? Because you learn before you didn't know how to handle a shark passing you by when you're in the deep ocean, right? Now you see it and you go, oh, okay, the next one that comes by, you're not gonna get all excited and you're gonna understand how to handle that better,
Mm.
right? So you're learning to regulate your emotions differently with each pressure situation that you put yourself in. And I think that's what's important as a foundational skill. One of the other things is, as an executive consultant, I saw is that so many leaders don't practice emotional regulation enough that their teams are successful or their teams feel they can trust them.
Mm.
So I see it part of the architecture because emotions under pressure drive your behavior.
Yeah. I feel like if I put myself as an employee or team leaders and I have a boss, which I used to have a boss like that before in a corporate role, and and for me, what I feel is like I the trust is not there and I don't dare to speak up. So that
Mhm.
there's no more connection there. You
Yes,
know,
yes,
I didn't dare to speak up. Yeah, even if
right.
I have bright ideas, I didn't want to because I don't know whether he's gonna be reactive or what, you know.
Yes,
So
yes.
it, in a way, it kind of I suppress my own growth,
Hmm.
me
Yes,
in
yes.
that organization, and how I feel about others. I think they are likely the same. And I
Yes,
do see this thing now that the operational or the company is not growing the way it can grow, the potential
yes,
of growing,
yes.
right?
Because you're suppressing your emotions
I'm
now.
surprising, right?
Yeah,
Because I'm
yeah,
scared, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
have a reactive boss.
yeah. That's one of the reasons why I put emotional regulation as one of the pillars is because it's personal, but it's also relational,
Mm,
right? Because you're going to whatever you give out, it's going to be contagious.
mm. So, Dr. Phil, your fourth pillar is impactful communication. I love that word. How does mindful presence change the way a leader speaks, listens, or even remains silent?
Yeah. I like that you added even in silence, that because that's so important in this in the clarification of how people communicate, right? That communication is a inner uh, intention, an outer reaction, and also creating that silent space for things to happen is very, very powerful as well. So I'm glad you add that in. We've talked before, Annie, about how communication
Mhm.
begins before it's even spoken, right? It begins by what we're thinking or feeling inside, and then how that comes out in our actions or words,
Mhm.
how it comes out in silence, maybe. Um, you know, it's the difference between trying to defend yourself, prove a point.
Mhm.
Um, it's your body language, it's your tone. All of those things play a huge part in communication, as we know. And if you're in a meeting, all of those things are critical and of importance, right? So um, to communication also helps strengthen relationships, right? So there's also, just as we talked about with emotional regulation, impactful communication also has the ability to be relational. and is very relational in so many aspects. Um, but when a leader's fully present, fully aware, right, they take that intention and they put it into action, right? So a leader doesn't ask, what do I say? They may say that internally, right? What do I say?
Mm-hmm.
But what's more important is, how can I say this that it has more impact on my team?
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons I call it impactful communication, is because it's not just what you think you're going to say, it's saying it with impact, saying it with empathy, compassion, or in a way that's going to get your team members enthused and excited and engaged in making a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that there's that influential part of leadership where communication comes in and enters the picture. Even in silence, right? If you're sitting in a room and you you just don't say anything, and as a leader, the people start looking around, like, what's going to happen, right? And that's a powerful. That can be a very, very powerful moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, when people start wondering what you might say or how you're going to say it, and so you need to be fully engaged in the moment, fully aware. You need to, you know, transcend. Your words should transcend um, the action or what's going to happen, right?
I think this is really
Um,
important, Dr. Phil.
mhm,
As a leader, obviously we have to lead, right? So to
mhm.
me, the conventional leadership is you stay at the back, you push from, you would go
Yes.
and do it, do it.
Push, push, push.
But I've seen two different leaders. I've would be really good bosses, good
Mhm,
leaders, and of course the not so good ones. So I could kind of see the difference. Good
yep,
leaders lead from the front,
mhm,
and I feel that is very what you mentioned just now, impactful communication, because whatever he says, right, is backed by his action. So people follow. And
yes,
that
yes,
is really, really impactful. Yeah.
yes,
As
yeah.
opposed to a leader who just sits there and kind of push you
Pushes,
push
pushes.
you, push
Yeah.
you thing. And I like the way you mentioned just now. I took a note down. You say understanding the intention
Mhm.
behind so that you can create an impactful communication because work needs to get done, right? So
Yes, exactly.
it's
Yeah.
to me, I feel like if a boss is coming, putting back myself in a way before
Mhm,
being a leader when I started work. It's really interesting now to see that different in
mhm.
terms of how leaders try to push from the back and
Yes.
how the leaders who leads from the front,
Front. It's very different. Very,
and
very different.
understanding that intention behind what work need to be done. So
Yeah.
it's like if it's communicated or disseminated properly to the
Mhm.
team, things get done. If it's not
Yes.
communicated properly, there's too many ambiguity among the team. Some will want to do, some will not want to do, or do it. For me, it's like I sometimes do things half-heartedly. As
Yeah. 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 A lot of times people
happen
do.
if I don't have a good leader. As opposed to I'm not comparing leaders, but I'm looking at myself. If before when I'm following this leader and he leads from fun, how uh how I thrive, how I grow, and a leader
Mhm,
who push from the back or who
mhm.
are really reactive, how I suppress my own growth, and I'm putting
Yeah.
half-hearted work in there.
Yeah.
I think this happened to a lot of people, and leaders who are up there probably may not able to see this.
Yes, I concur with you 100%. Um, I've had leaders that lead from the front and leaders that push from behind as well. And uh, there's three things I think are important in communication, and that's, first intention, what's your intention? Um, and then being aware of that intention, and then how you connect with the people around you with that intention. So, those connections are critical to how you get things done. So when a leader leads from behind and you start to suppress your feelings and emotions inside, what happens is that eventually you're going to sustain burnout.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
you
yeah.
know, that's for people because they want to do more, but their leader won't allow them through
Mm,
their communication to do more. And they want to be more, but the leader doesn't, leadership model doesn't allow them to, right?
mm,
Um,
mm,
so it's it's a critical piece for motivating and influencing your team
mm,
members, right?
I like the way you say it, motivating and influencing. And that brings me to
Yeah.
this. Go ahead.
No, no, that's what I think leadership is about, is influencing and motivating other people to do the job and get it done in the best way possible, right?
That brings me to the next question. I am really curious about this. What
Okay.
distinguishes impactful communication, like I said, motivating, from persuasive communication? You know, I sometimes have bosses who come and try to sweet talk you to do things.
Yeah.
They're not they're not really intentional. I don't
Yeah,
see, I don't know how to explain that, but you know what I mean, right? So
I do.
I
I
would
do.
really like the audience to benefit from this. What distinguishes the impactful communication as a leader, right,
Right.
from persuasive communication?
That's love the question. Love the question. And in order to answer that, we have to, I think, break down. We've talked about impactful communication. Let's break down persuasive communication a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And because persuasive communication is about uh, being outcome driven, right? It's about um, convincing people to buy into your goal, right? Influence somebody toward a particular position or way of thought. Um, and it's skillful and it's strategic, but it's usually not effective, right? Because you haven't had time, you're trying to persuade or convince the person without the intention of awareness and connection.
Ah,
And that's where I think where persuasion is missed is one, you're not being aware, you're just trying to convince. You're not, your intentions are to convince rather than to help and assist. And finding that connection is lacking.
ah.
Thus, persuasion, communication has a very, there are times where where it may be appropriate, but in most leadership roles, there's better ways to get results.
Oh, I love that. I love that you mentioned it's not effective. It's skillful, right? It is strategic, outcome
Mhm.
based, right? Like, I have bosses who come and tell, sweet talk me to do things, but I know. Yeah, but without awareness, and that communication is really important, because then the person, the subordinates, again, I'm going to put myself back, those days when to actually fill that space.
Mhm.
Um, it's true, I will do, but like I say, half-heartedly, and I won't understand why do I need to do that. But because
Right.
it's my job, I'll just do it. And the
Right.
quality of the work may not necessarily be my top quality, you know. I,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. I guess one example I could give is maybe a politician.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A politician, there's two different politicians, right? And one politician that tries to persuade people to vote for them a certain way because they are doing certain things, right? But then another politician goes knocking on doors and talking to people and connect with them and says, vote for me. And that's the different connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the difference in persuasion versus making a connection and how they communicate that
Mm-hmm.
um, is
Mm-hmm.
very, very different and has different outcomes.
Wow. I think this is really profound how you put everything together in this four pillar.
Mhm.
From what you have explained, I can see the rain strengthens this inner pause, and the four
Mhm.
pillars kind of expresses this mindful leadership in action, but they
Mhm.
come from the basic, mindfulness foundation of the rain, right?
Right.
I would love to know, how do you personally see inner pause shaping these pillars?
How I say that
How
one
do
more
you
time.
how do you personally see this inner pause shaping the four pillars? Like
Shaping the four pillars.
personal practice, right?
It the inner pause is the key ingredient. It's the key ingredient to each of the four pillars. Um, if we look at being aware in the moment, we
Mhm.
can't, we won't have the deep awareness that we need to lead without taking time for an inner pause. If we want to be authentically grounded in what we're doing, it's going to be hard for us to be authentically grounded without stepping back and taking a moment and saying, uh, I'm here, right? Let's move forward.
Yeah.
Same with emotional regulation. You feel that physiology in your body, and you're like, wait a minute, I don't want to be like this. I have a different intention,
Mm.
right? And then impactful communication, you want that inner pause before you speak
Mhm.
so that you speak impactfully and with intention.
Wow.
So you hit it on that. It's the key ingredient to everything.
Yeah. I would say, if I were to summarize this, right, I would say that the key ingredient here, the inner pause, it's it's like saying you can understand it intellectually, but you have to put yourself into that practice to be able to embody that.
Ah, I love that. Yes, yes, yes. The
Yay! Thank
the
you.
embodiment part is is the key. You
Yeah.
have to embody the principles and live them,
Mhm. Mhm.
or you people won't feel them and you won't experience them.
Mhm. Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, I love how you added embodiment in there. That's great.
So one
Okay,
more last question for the benefit of the audience who are listening here.
sure.
If a listener, a leader, right, who is listening right now today, feels
Mhm.
overwhelmed and wants to begin with just one pillar, where would you suggest they start and why?
I would suggest that they start with awareness.
Mm, and why?
I would say just stop what you're doing, be aware, take a deep breath, and be aware of what's happening inside you, around you, and what your next action may be.
Mm, mhm,
And really that's that inner pause, right? That's inner pause of being aware in the moment that shapes your actions.
Thank you so much. I think this is really beneficial to the leaders out there who are listening. Thank you so much, Will, for today's
Yeah,
session. I love
it's
the
my
four
pleasure.
pillars.
It's
Yeah,
my pleasure to talk about these ideas with you and how they're such in harmony with what you do as a mindful teacher and instructor.
yeah, I think it's really important, and I love the way how things are put together in that four pillar.
Mhm.
Again, I would
Thank you.
like to re-emphasize this, the key ingredient. The inner pause is really doing that practice, because with that practice comes awareness, and then it comes and it covers the whole four pillars, not
Yes.
just understanding it intellectually, but with that practice, you're not applying a skill, and you're not applying, a theory, or strategically or whatever, but
No.
embodying that practice because it comes out naturally.
Yes. The embodiment of the practice is so important because every time that you practice it, it becomes easier and your mind is your vision widens
Mhm.
and it changes how you look at things. The more you practice it, the better aware you are and the more you embody it. So,
Thank you so much. This is so, so, so
hey, Amy,
profound.
it's a
And
pleasure.
before we end, let's just pause together here.
Yes,
May I
awesome.
invite you and the audience to gently close your eyes? Take a deep in breath and a long and slow out breath. Now there's nothing here to fix, nothing to change. We're just noticing what's here, what's present right now. And taking in another deep in breath and a long out breath. And may whatever you're carrying today be met with kindness. And may your leadership, whether it is in work or life, be guided by presence. Thank you very much for sharing this space with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you. Appreciate it.